The detention cell aboard the Kethrathi flagship times Dominion's edge times hummed with the low vibration of massive engines. Marcus Chen sat on the metal bench, his weathered hands clasped loosely between his knees, studying the energy barrier that kept him contained. The purple shimmer of the force field cast strange shadows across his scarred face, highlighting the silver stubble on his jaw and the network of fine lines around his dark eyes. He had been here for 3 standard days now. Ever since the Kethrathi patrol ships had surrounded his small cargo vessel in the disputed sector near Kepler 442, they had demanded his surrender, claiming his ship was stolen property of the Kethrathi Empire. Marcus had laughed at that, which seemed to confuse them greatly. The Kethrathi were tall, elegant beings with elongated skulls and skin that shifted between deep purple and midnight blue depending on their emotional state. They considered themselves the apex civilization in this arm of the galaxy, having conquered 47 star systems over the past 3 centuries. Their technology was impressive, their military disciplined, and their arrogance absolute. What they didn't understand about humans was that none of that mattered much when you pushed them too far. Marcus heard the familiar whisper of the cell door's energy field powering down. 3 Kethrathi guards entered, their ceremonial armor gleaming with embedded circuitry that pulsed with soft blue light. The lead guard, whose skin tone indicated he was nervous despite his attempt at authority, gestured with a 4-fingered hand. "Human Marcus Chen," the guard said, his voice carrying the musical quality typical of his species. "Emperor Vashti Mordeth commands your presence in the judgment chamber." Marcus stood slowly, his joints protesting slightly. 58 years old, with 30 of those spent in military service across a dozen worlds, had left their mark on his body, but his mind remained sharp, and his resolve harder than the tritanium hull plates of the warships he had once commanded. "Well," Marcus said, his voice calm and steady, "I suppose we shouldn't keep His Imperial Magnificence waiting." 17. The sarcasm was lost on the guards, who escorted him through corridors lined with trophy cases displaying artifacts from conquered worlds. Marcus recognized some of them. A Centauri ceremonial blade, a chunk of crystal from the vegan mining colonies, even what looked like a piece of earth oak, though he couldn't imagine how they had acquired that. The judgment chamber was a vast, circular room with a domed ceiling that displayed a real-time view of the stars outside. Hundreds of Kethrathi officials and military officers stood in tiered seating around the chamber's perimeter, their skin colors ranging from deep violet to pale lavender. At the chamber's center sat a throne carved from a single massive crystal, and upon it sat Emperor Vashti Mordeth himself. The emperor was ancient by Kethrathi standards, his skin having faded to an almost translucent white with age, though his eyes remained sharp and intelligent. He wore robes embedded with circuitry that formed complex patterns across the fabric, marking his status as supreme ruler of the Kethrathi Empire. A crown of twisted metal and embedded crystals sat upon his elongated skull, pulsing with internal light. "Approach," the emperor commanded, his voice amplified throughout the chamber. Marcus walked forward until he stood before the crystal throne, his boots clicking against the polished floor. He didn't bow, didn't show any of the deference that the Kethrathi expected from conquered species. Instead, he simply stood at ease, hands clasped behind his back, and waited. The emperor studied him for a long moment, clearly expecting some display of fear or submission that wasn't coming. Finally, he spoke. "I am Emperor Vashti Mordeth, conqueror of worlds, master of the stellar dominion, supreme ruler of the Kethrathi Empire. You stand accused of theft of imperial property, specifically the cargo vessel designated K-47 Delta." Marcus tilted his head slightly. "That's interesting. Your Imperial Magnificence. I was under the impression that the vessel in question was built in the Henderson shipyards above Mars, using materials mined from the asteroid belt, and purchased with credits earned through legitimate salvage operations." A murmur ran through the assembled Kethrathi. The Emperor's skin shifted slightly toward purple, indicating irritation. "You speak of human territories as if they have meaning," the Emperor said. "All space belongs to the Kethrathi Empire. All vessels that traverse our domain are subject to our laws. Your Earth and its pathetic colonies are merely unconquered territories awaiting our attention." Marcus smiled then, and something in that expression made several of the nearby guards shift uncomfortably. Unconquered, Marcus repeated. That's an interesting choice of words. You find something amusing about your situation, human? The Emperor leaned forward in his throne. Oh, I find quite a lot amusing about this situation, Marcus replied. But I'm particularly curious about your claim to my ship. See, the vessel you're calling K-47 Delta was built 23 years ago. It was originally commissioned as a medium transport for the Terran Colonial Authority, designated TCL Marcus Aurelius. The Emperor waved a hand dismissively. Human designations are irrelevant. The vessel now bears Kethrathi markings and operates under Imperial authority. Ah, Marcus nodded. And when exactly did the Kethrathi Empire conquer Earth and its colonies? The question hung in the air like a challenge. The Emperor's skin darkened further toward purple. The conquest is inevitable. Human resistance is merely delaying the natural order. I see. So you haven't actually conquered humanity yet, but you're claiming ownership of human vessels anyway? Marcus's voice remained conversational, almost friendly. But there was something underneath it that made the guards around him tense. This debate is pointless, the Emperor declared. You will return the stolen vessel to Imperial custody and accept judgment for your crimes. Marcus was quiet for a moment, studying the Emperor's face. Then he spoke, and his voice carried clearly throughout the chamber. Your Imperial Magnificence, I have a proposition for you. The Emperor raised what might have been an eyebrow on his alien features. You are hardly in a position to make propositions, human. Oh, but I think I am, Marcus said. You claim my ship belongs to you. I claim it belongs to me. There's a simple way to settle this dispute. Speak. Marcus gestured toward the viewing dome above them, where his small cargo vessel was visible, held in a tractor beam alongside the massive Kethrathi flagship. The ship is right there. If it truly belongs to you, then you should be able to start it up and fly it away. Marcus's smile widened. After all, a ship only responds to its rightful owner. The chamber erupted in conversation as the assembled Kethrathi discussed this unexpected turn. The Emperor held up a hand for silence, his ancient eyes fixed on Marcus. You suggest some form of test? I'm suggesting we settle this like rational beings, Marcus replied. If your people can start the ship and operate its systems, then clearly it belongs to you. And I'll accept whatever punishment you deem appropriate. But if they can't, he shrugged. Well, then maybe we need to reconsider who actually owns what around here. The Emperor was silent for a long moment, considering. Marcus could see the calculations running behind those ancient eyes. The human was either supremely confident or supremely foolish, and the Emperor wasn't sure which. And if we accept this test and prove our rightful ownership, you will submit to imperial justice without further resistance? If you can start the ship, I'll acknowledge your claim, Marcus said. Then his smile took on a different quality. Something that made even the Emperor shift slightly in his throne. But your Imperial Magnificence, I have one more condition. You are in no position to make conditions. Humor me, Marcus said. When your people can't start the ship, and they won't be able to, I want you to personally try. After all, if anyone in the Kethrathi Empire should be able to command an Imperial vessel, it should be the Emperor himself. The challenge was clear now, hanging in the air between them. The Emperor's skin had shifted to a deep purple, indicating significant emotional stress. But he couldn't back down from such a direct challenge in front of his entire court. Very well, the Emperor said finally. We will conduct this test. Admiral Kethnol, select your finest engineers and technicians. Take them to the human vessel and demonstrate our rightful ownership. A tall Kethrathi in ornate military dress stepped forward and bowed. It will be done, my Emperor. As arrangements were made, Marcus continued to stand calmly before the crystal throne. But inside, his mind was racing through calculations of his own. The TCL Marcus Aurelius wasn't just any cargo vessel. It was built during the height of the Human-Centauri War, when Earth's military had been paranoid about security and had implemented certain features in their civilian vessels. Features that the Kethrathi were about to discover the hard way. Admiral Kethnol assembled a team of 12 engineers and technicians, the finest the Kethrathi Empire had to offer. They boarded a shuttle and made their way to Marcus's vessel. Their movements tracked on the chamber's viewing system. The assembled court watched as the team docked with the cargo ship and entered through the main airlock. Marcus watched too, his expression peaceful and patient. He knew exactly what was about to happen. The first surprise came when the Kethrathi team discovered that the ship's systems were still active. Most species shut down their vessels when captured, but Marcus had left everything running. The bridge lights were on, the computers were humming, and the control stations were clearly operational. Admiral Kethnal's team approached the main pilot station with confidence. The Kethrathi had conquered dozens of species and were familiar with hundreds of different types of technology. How difficult could one small human vessel be? The answer came when the team leader reached for the primary control interface. The moment his four-fingered hand touched the console, every screen on the bridge went dark. Emergency lighting activated, bathing the bridge in red light, and a voice echoed through the ship's communication system. Unauthorized access detected. Initiating security protocol 7 Alpha. The Kethrathi team exchanged glances. This was not what they had expected. Security protocols were common enough, but this system had activated so quickly and decisively that it caught them off guard. Back in the judgment chamber, Marcus continued to watch with that same patient smile. The Emperor noticed. "You seem remarkably calm for someone whose fate hangs in the balance," the Emperor observed. "Oh, I'm confident in the outcome," Marcus replied. "Though I suspect your people are about to get a crash course in human engineering philosophy." On the bridge of the cargo vessel, Admiral Kethnal was discovering exactly what Marcus meant. The security system hadn't just locked them out. It had begun actively interfering with their efforts. Every time they tried to access a control system, the ship's computer would immediately shut it down and activate additional security measures. Within minutes, they found themselves locked out of navigation, engines, life support controls, and even basic environmental systems. The ship was effectively rejecting them, treating them as intruders rather than legitimate operators. "This is ridiculous," Admiral Kethnal muttered, his skin shifting toward orange with frustration. "It's a cargo vessel, not a military cruiser. How sophisticated could its security be?" His chief engineer, a brilliant technician named Vorthok, was working frantically at an auxiliary console. "Admiral, I've never seen anything like this. The security system is adaptive. Every time we find a potential access point, it immediately closes it and creates new barriers. It's like the ship is actively fighting us." "Then bypass it," the Admiral snapped. "Cut power to the security system." "We tried that," Vorthok replied, his skin now showing stress patterns. "The security system is distributed throughout the ship's entire network. We can't isolate it without shutting down everything, including life support." Admiral Kethnal stared at the darkened bridge displays, his confidence beginning to crack. The Kethrathi Empire had conquered 47 star systems. They had defeated species with technology far more advanced than anything Earth had shown. How could one small human cargo vessel be defeating their best engineers? The answer lay in something the Kethrathi didn't understand about humans. They were paranoid, creative, and absolutely ruthless when it came to protecting what was theirs. Back in the judgment chamber, the Emperor was watching the proceedings with growing concern. His finest technical team was being systematically defeated by a civilian cargo vessel, and the human responsible was still standing there with that insufferable smile. "Perhaps your people need more time," Marcus suggested helpfully. "Human technology can be tricky for those unfamiliar with it." The Emperor's skin had now shifted to a dangerous dark purple. "Admiral Kethnal is the finest military engineer in the Empire. If there is a way to operate that vessel, he will find it." "Oh, I'm sure he's very competent," Marcus agreed. "But competence and familiarity are different things. See, that ship was built during wartime, when humans were feeling particularly protective of their assets." As if to emphasize his point, the communication system crackled to life with Admiral Kethnal's voice. "My Emperor, we require additional time. The security system is more complex than anticipated." The Emperor's expression darkened. Around the chamber, Hundreds of Kethrathi officials watched their military's finest being defeated by a single human cargo vessel. The implications were uncomfortable. Marcus checked the chronometer on his wrist, a simple mechanical device that the Kethrathi had overlooked during his capture. "Well, Your Imperial Magnificence. It's been about an hour. How much more time do you think they need?" The question hung in the air like an accusation. The Emperor found himself in an impossible position. He couldn't admit defeat, but every moment that passed made it more obvious that his people couldn't operate the human vessel. And Marcus just kept standing there, patient as stone, waiting for the Emperor to realize what he had already figured out. This wasn't really about the ship at all. This was about the fundamental misunderstanding the Kethrathi Empire had about humanity. They were about to learn that humans didn't just build tools. They built loyalty, determination, and sheer bloody-mindedness into everything they touched. And sometimes, that made all the difference. 3 hours had passed since Admiral Kethnal's team had boarded the human vessel. In that time, they had tried everything in their considerable arsenal of technological expertise. They had attempted to hack the ship's systems using advanced Kethrathi cyber warfare tools. They had tried to physically bypass the security protocols by rerouting power conduits. They had even brought aboard their most sophisticated analysis equipment from the flagship. Nothing worked. The cargo vessel sat in the tractor beam like a sleeping beast, its systems humming with power but remaining completely unresponsive to Kethrathi control. Worse, the ship seemed to be actively mocking their efforts. Every few minutes, various displays would light up briefly, showing tantalizing glimpses of operational systems, only to shut down again the moment anyone approached. In the judgment chamber, the assembled Kethrathi court was growing restless. What had begun as an amusing demonstration of imperial superiority was becoming an embarrassing display of imperial incompetence. Whispered conversations echoed through the tiered seating as officials and military officers debated what they were witnessing. Emperor Vashti Mordeth sat rigidly on his crystal throne, his skin having cycled through several color changes as he processed the implications of his military's failure. The human still stood before him, hands clasped behind his back, looking for all the world like a patient teacher waiting for a slow student to understand a simple lesson. "Admiral Kethnal," the Emperor finally spoke into his communication device, "report your status." The Admiral's voice carried a note of frustration that no one in the chamber had ever heard from him before. "My Emperor, we have encountered significant resistance from the vessel's security systems. The human technology is unconventional. Elaborate." There was a pause. "The ship appears to be programmed to recognize specific biological and behavioral markers before allowing access to its controls. We have isolated several of these requirements, but they are unusual." Marcus raised an eyebrow but said nothing. He was curious to see how far the Kethrathi would take their analysis before asking the obvious question. "What sort of requirements?" the Emperor demanded. "Well, my Emperor, the ship seems to require biometric authentication from a carbon-based life form with specific genetic markers consistent with human Terran origins. But that's not all. The system also appears to be scanning for psychological patterns." "Explain." "The ship is looking for specific stress responses, decision-making patterns, and even emotional markers that correspond to human military training. It's as if the vessel will only accept commands from someone who thinks like a human soldier." A murmur ran through the chamber. The Kethrathi had never encountered technology that required such specific psychological compatibility. Their own systems were designed for efficiency and interoperability across different subspecies within their empire. Marcus finally spoke, his voice carrying easily through the chamber. "Admiral Kethnal is correct, as far as he goes. But he's missing the most important requirement." The Emperor's attention snapped back to Marcus. "Which is, the ship has to believe you belong there," Marcus said simply. "It's not enough to have the right genetics or the right training. You have to approach it like you own it, like you belong on that bridge, like you have every right to be giving it commands." The chamber fell silent. Several Kethrathi exchanged glances, trying to process this concept. Their technology responded to authority and proper protocols, not to abstract concepts like belonging or ownership. "You're saying the machine has feelings?" the Emperor asked. his tone suggesting he thought the human might be delusional. Marcus smiled. Not feelings exactly. But humans don't just build tools. Your Imperial Magnificence. We build relationships. That ship has been with me for 15 years. It's taken me through asteroid fields, hostile space, and more close calls than I care to remember. It knows me, and I know it. Machines do not know their operators, the Emperor stated flatly. Kethrathi machines don't, Marcus agreed. Human machines do. We build them that way because we learned a long time ago that technology without loyalty is just tools waiting to be turned against you. The Emperor considered this. It was an alien concept, but he was beginning to understand that humans might be more alien than he had initially assumed. Very well, the Emperor said. You claim the ship will only respond to you because of this relationship. Prove it. I'd be happy to, Marcus replied. But that wasn't our agreement. You said if your people could start the ship, it belonged to you. They can't. Now it's your turn to try. The Emperor's skin shifted toward purple again. I will not personally descend to prove a point to a captured criminal. Ah, Marcus nodded. I see. So when I suggested that the Emperor of the mighty Kethrathi Empire should be able to command any vessel in his domain, I was being unreasonable? It was a masterful trap, and everyone in the chamber recognized it. The Emperor couldn't refuse without appearing weak in front of his entire court, but accepting meant risking personal humiliation when he inevitably failed to operate the human vessel. You are attempting to manipulate me, the Emperor observed. I'm attempting to resolve our disagreement, Marcus corrected. You claim ownership of my ship. I claim it belongs to me. Your people have had their chance to prove your claim. Now it's your turn. The Emperor was silent for a long moment, weighing his options. Around the chamber, hundreds of Kethrathi officials watched and waited. Many of them had served under Vashti Mordeth for decades and had never seen him in such a difficult position. Finally, the Emperor rose from his throne. Very well. I will personally demonstrate imperial authority over this vessel. A shuttle was prepared for the Emperor's use, and he selected a minimal escort of his most trusted guards. Marcus was brought along as well, though he remained bound by energy restraints that would prevent any aggressive action. The journey to the cargo vessel took only a few minutes, but it felt longer to everyone involved. The Emperor maintained his imperial dignity, but Marcus could see the tension in his posture. This was not a situation the ruler of a galactic empire had ever expected to face. Admiral Kethnal met them at the airlock, his expression grim. My Emperor. We have continued our analysis while you were en route. The security system appears to be even more complex than we initially realized. Show me, the Emperor commanded. They proceeded to the bridge, where the Admiral's technical team had set up monitoring equipment around every control station. Cables and diagnostic devices covered most surfaces, and the air hummed with the electronic signatures of active scanning systems. We have mapped 93 different security protocols, Admiral Kethnal reported. The system monitors everything from biometric signatures to behavioral patterns to psychological stress indicators. It even appears to track vocal patterns and decision-making speed. The Emperor studied the darkened control stations. And you believe I cannot satisfy these requirements? My Emperor. The system is specifically calibrated for human psychological and biological norms. Even if you could somehow mimic the required responses, the genetic authentication alone would prevent access. Marcus, who had been listening quietly, finally spoke up. May I make a suggestion? Your Imperial Magnificence? The Emperor turned to him. Speak. Try starting it without trying to fool the system. Just walk up to the pilot station and attempt to engage the engines as if you owned the ship. The Emperor studied Marcus's face, looking for signs of deception. You believe this will work? I believe it will be instructive, Marcus replied. The Emperor approached the main pilot station, his ornate robes rustling softly in the bridge's quiet atmosphere. His guards positioned themselves around the bridge, watching for any signs of treachery from the human prisoner. Emperor Vashti Mordeth placed his four-fingered hands on the primary control interface. For a moment, Nothing happened. Then the screens flickered to life, displaying what appeared to be the ship's main operational menu. A collective intake of breath echoed through the bridge. Had the Emperor actually succeeded where his finest technicians had failed? The answer came seconds later, when every display went dark again. And a new message appeared on the central screen. Authentication failed. Unauthorized, user detected. Initiating enhanced security protocols. Red warning lights began flashing throughout the bridge, and an automated voice filled the air. Intruder alert. Unauthorized access attempt by non-human entity. Lockdown protocols activated. The Emperor stepped back from the console, his skin shifting to a deep purple. Around him, his technical team looked embarrassed and frustrated. Admiral Kethnal stared at his instruments in disbelief. "The system recognized your genetic markers immediately," Marcus said, his tone conversational. "But more than that, it could tell you weren't approaching it like someone who belonged here. You were testing it, evaluating it, trying to control it. But you weren't treating it like your ship." "Because it is not my ship," the Emperor replied through clenched teeth. "Exactly," Marcus said, "and the ship knows that." The Emperor turned to face Marcus directly. "This proves nothing except that your species builds paranoid machines. Does it?" Marcus asked. "Your Imperial Magnificence. May I ask how the Kethrathi Empire typically conquers new territories?" The Emperor frowned at the change of subject. "Our military forces establish orbital superiority, then demand surrender from planetary governments. Those who submit are incorporated into the empire. Those who resist are pacified. And their technology, their ships, their weapons, their infrastructure, becomes property of the empire, to be used as we see fit." Marcus nodded. "And how often do you encounter resistance from the conquered technology itself?" The question hung in the air. The Emperor began to understand where Marcus was leading. "Our captured vessels are operated by Kethrathi crews without difficulty," the Emperor said slowly. "Because those species built their technology to be transferable," Marcus replied. "They built tools that could be used by anyone with the proper knowledge. Humans build relationships. You're suggesting that all human technology is similarly protective?" Marcus smiled, but there was something cold in the expression now. "I'm suggesting that humans learned a long time ago what happens when your tools can be turned against you. Every human ship, every human weapon, every human system worth protecting has safeguards built in at the most fundamental level." The implications began to settle over the assembled Kethrathi. They had been planning to conquer human space, expecting to capture and utilize human technology as they had done with dozens of other species. But if Marcus was telling the truth, "You're claiming that conquest of human territory would be pointless because we couldn't use your technology," the Emperor said. "I'm claiming that conquest of human territory would be suicidal," Marcus corrected, "because our technology doesn't just stop working when you take it. It starts working against you." Admiral Kethnal looked up from his instruments. "My Emperor, I'm detecting significant changes in the ship's power distribution. The security system is drawing more energy than should be possible from a vessel this size." Marcus checked his chronometer again. "Right on schedule. You gentlemen might want to step back from the control stations." "Why?" the Emperor demanded. "Because in about 30 seconds, this ship is going to demonstrate why humans build loyalty into our machines." Before anyone could react, every screen on the bridge lit up simultaneously, but instead of displaying operational information, they showed tactical data, firing solutions, targeting information, and weapons system status. The automated voice returned, but its tone had changed from warning to something much more ominous. "Multiple hostile contacts detected aboard vessel. Initiating defensive protocols. Recommend immediate evacuation of all non-authorized personnel." The Emperor's skin went pale. "It's threatening us." "No," Marcus said calmly. "It's defending itself. And me." Alarms began sounding throughout the ship, and the bridge lighting shifted to combat configuration. On the tactical displays, red targeting indicators began appearing over each Kethrathi present. Admiral Kethnal's instruments went wild. "My Emperor, the ship is charging weapon systems I didn't even know it had. Energy readings are off the scale." "What weapons?" the Emperor shouted. "It's a cargo vessel." Marcus smiled again, and this time the expression was distinctly predatory. Your Imperial Magnificence, allow me to introduce you to the TCL Marcus Aurelius, refitted cargo hauler, registered salvage vessel, and former captain's yacht of Admiral Marcus Chen, Terran Colonial Navy. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the ship's alarms seemed to quiet as the full implications sank in. Admiral? The Emperor whispered. Retired, Marcus said. Been hauling cargo for 15 years, trying to enjoy a peaceful retirement. But old habits die hard, and old ships remember their training. The tactical displays updated again, now showing detailed schematics of the Kethrathi flagship, alongside targeting solutions that would have impressed a military tactician. Now then, Your Imperial Magnificence, Marcus said, his voice still calm but carrying new weight. Shall we discuss who this ship really belongs to? The bridge of the TCL Marcus Aurelius hummed with barely contained energy as targeting systems tracked every Kethrathi present. Admiral Kethnal's instruments showed power readings that shouldn't have been possible from a vessel of this size, while Emperor Vashti Mordeth stood frozen, his pale skin reflecting the red glow of combat lighting. Marcus remained calm, his energy restraints still active but somehow irrelevant now that his ship had awakened to protect him. The tactical displays showed weapon systems that Admiral Kethnal's team had completely missed in their analysis: hidden plasma batteries, concealed missile tubes, and defensive systems that had been disguised as ordinary cargo handling equipment. Shall I explain what you're looking at, Your Imperial Magnificence? Marcus asked conversationally. Or would you prefer to have your technical team figure it out on their own? The Emperor found his voice after a moment. You were military. 30 years, Terran Colonial Navy, started as an engineering ensign, worked my way up through the ranks during the Centauri War, the Vegan Rebellion, and the Siege of Kepler Station. Commanded 17 different vessels over my career, from patrol boats to dreadnoughts. Marcus gestured toward his ship's displays with his bound hands. This beauty was my personal transport during the final years of my service. A captain's yacht, Admiral Kethnal whispered, his instruments still showing impossible energy readings. Modified extensively, Marcus confirmed. Humans have a saying, hope for the best, prepare for the worst. I hoped for peaceful retirement hauling cargo through safe space. But I prepared for the possibility that someone might mistake me for an easy target. The Emperor was beginning to understand the scope of his miscalculation. How many others are there? How many of your cargo haulers are actually military vessels in disguise? Marcus smiled. Your Imperial Magnificence. That's the wrong question. What is the right question? The right question is, how many of our actual military vessels are out there, and why haven't you encountered them yet? The tactical displays shifted again, now showing star charts of the surrounding systems. Red indicators marked known Kethrathi fleet positions, while blue indicators showed something that made Admiral Kethnal step back from his instruments in shock. What am I looking at? The Emperor demanded. Real-time tactical data from the Terran Colonial Navy's Deep Space Monitoring Network, Marcus replied. Your Imperial Magnificence. Your empire has been under observation for the past 6 months. Every fleet movement, every patrol route, every communication between your vessels has been monitored and analyzed. The blue indicators on the display began multiplying, showing dozens of contacts that had been invisible to Kethrathi sensors, ships that had been hiding in asteroid fields, behind moons, even in the coronas of stars, watching and waiting. Impossible, the Emperor breathed. Our sensors would have detected them. Those Kethrathi sensors are very good, Marcus agreed. But human stealth technology was developed during wars where detection meant death. We learned to hide from enemies who had better technology, better weapons, and better numbers. We survived by being invisible until we chose not to be. Admiral Kethnal was frantically working at his instruments, trying to confirm what the displays were showing. My Emperor, I'm detecting massive energy signatures throughout this sector. They're decloaking. On the main display, the blue indicators began revealing themselves as actual vessels, sleek, predatory shapes that had been hiding in space so effectively that the entire Kethrathi fleet had been operating under observation without knowing it. Admiral Sarah Martinez, commanding the TCV Indomitable, Marcus said, reading from his ship's communications display. Admiral David Kim, commanding the TCV Retribution. Admiral Elena Rodriguez, commanding the TCV Defiance. He looked up at the Emperor. Shall I continue? Because I count 14 fleet admirals in this sector alone, and they're all very interested in our little conversation. The Emperor's skin had gone completely white. 14. Fleets? The Terran Colonial Navy takes a dim view of anyone claiming ownership of our ships, Marcus explained. When I failed to report in 3 days ago, Admiral Martinez began tracking my last known position. When her scouts observed Kethrathi vessels claiming my ship as stolen property, he shrugged as much as his restraints allowed. Oh, well, admirals tend to take such things personally. The communication system crackled to life with a new voice, crisp and professional. This is Admiral Sarah Martinez, commanding Task Force 7 of the Terran Colonial Navy. To the Kethrathi vessel holding Admiral Marcus Chen, you are ordered to release him immediately and withdraw from this sector. Emperor Vashti Mordeth found himself in a position he had never experienced before. Outgunned, outmaneuvered, and completely at the mercy of an enemy he had underestimated to a degree that was almost incomprehensible. Admiral, he said to Marcus, his voice barely above a whisper. Retired, Marcus repeated. But the Navy has a saying, once an admiral, always an admiral. Retirement just means they give you a nice ship and let you choose your own missions. This was a trap. No, Your Imperial Magnificence. This was a miscalculation. You assumed that because humans hadn't made contact with your empire, we were either weak or ignorant of your existence. You assumed that our ships would be easy prizes, our technology simple to master, our resistance minimal. Marcus's expression grew serious. You assumed wrong on all counts. The tactical display updated again, showing the true scope of the human fleet presence. Ships appeared throughout the sector, surrounding the Kethrathi task force, in a formation that was both elegant and terrifying. The humans had been watching, waiting, learning everything about Kethrathi capabilities before revealing themselves. Admiral Kethnal looked up from his instruments with an expression of dawning horror. My Emperor. Our entire task force is surrounded. Energy readings suggest weapons powerful enough to sterilize every ship in your fleet in approximately 14 seconds, Marcus finished helpfully. But Admiral Martinez is a professional. She'll give you an opportunity to surrender before opening fire. As if summoned by his words, the communication system activated again. Kethrathi Emperor, you have 60 seconds to release Admiral Chen and begin withdrawal from this sector. Failure to comply will result in the total destruction of your task force. The Emperor stared at Marcus, trying to process the complete reversal of his situation. An hour ago, he had been the supreme ruler of a galactic empire, dispensing judgment to a captured human cargo hauler. Now he was facing annihilation at the hands of a military force he hadn't even known existed. What do you want? The Emperor asked. I want to finish hauling my cargo to Proxima Station and enjoy my retirement, Marcus replied. But since you've involved the active military, that decision is no longer mine to make. The Navy will accept our withdrawal? Marcus considered this. Your Imperial Magnificence. You've committed an act of piracy against a Terran citizen, unlawful detention of a retired military officer, and attempted theft of colonial Navy property. Under normal circumstances, Admiral Martinez would be well within her rights to demand your unconditional surrender and the payment of substantial reparations. Under normal circumstances, however, this is humanity's first official contact with the Kethrathi Empire. Admiral Martinez might be willing to treat this as a diplomatic incident rather than an act of war. The communication system crackled again. 30 seconds. Kethrathi Emperor. Emperor Vashti Mordeth looked around the bridge of the human vessel that had defied his finest technicians, threatened his guards, and revealed the presence of a military force that had been watching his empire without his knowledge. The weight of his miscalculation settled on him like a physical burden. What would humanity's terms be for treating this as a diplomatic incident? He asked. Marcus smiled. I'm just a retired cargo hauler. Your Imperial Magnificence. You'll have to ask Admiral Martinez about diplomatic terms, but I suspect they'll involve a formal apology, reparations for my detention, and probably some very serious discussions about boundaries and territorial claims. And if we refuse, then you'll discover why the Centauri called humans the species that doesn't know when to quit. Admiral Martinez has enough firepower in this sector to reduce your task force to component atoms. Admiral Kim has enough ships to blockade your home system. And Admiral Rodriguez. Marcus paused thoughtfully. Well, Elena has a reputation for creative problem-solving when it comes to dealing with aggressive neighbors. The countdown continued. 10 seconds. The Emperor made his decision. Release the human. Signal our fleet to stand down and prepare for withdrawal. Admiral Kethnal moved quickly to comply, but not before asking, My Emperor, what about our territorial claims in this sector? I suspect those will be subject to negotiation, the Emperor replied, watching as Marcus's energy restraints deactivated. Marcus rubbed his wrists where the restraints had been, then walked calmly to the pilot station of his ship. The moment he touched the controls, every system came online instantly. Displays lit up, engines hummed to life, and the ship's automated voice spoke with what sounded almost like relief. Welcome back, Admiral. All systems operational and ready for your command. Thank you, old friend, Marcus said softly. Stand down defensive protocols and prepare to receive Admiral Martinez's shuttle. The Emperor watched this interaction with fascination and growing respect. The ship truly does recognize you. She's been my home for 15 years, Marcus replied, running his hands over the familiar controls. Every system on this vessel is tuned to my biometrics, my behavioral patterns, my decision-making processes. She knows when I'm tired, when I'm stressed, when I'm thinking about combat maneuvers or cargo manifests. We're partners. This is how all human vessels operate. The important ones do. Cargo haulers, patrol boats, civilian transports, they all have some level of operator recognition. Our military vessels. Marcus smiled. Well, your Imperial Magnificence, let's just say that attempting to capture and use human warships would be even more challenging than what you experienced here. The communication system activated one final time. This is Admiral Martinez. Admiral Chen. Are you secure? Admiral Chen. Admiral Chen. Are you secure? 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 Are you secure? Admiral Chen. Secure and operational, Sarah. My ship and I are ready to resume normal operations. Outstanding. Emperor Vashti Mordeth, your fleet will withdraw to beyond the 20 light-year limit while we establish formal diplomatic protocols. Any attempt to approach human space or interfere with human vessels will be considered an act of war. The Emperor activated his own communication system with shaking hands. Understood, Admiral Martinez. The Kethrathi fleet will comply with your instructions. As arrangements were made for the withdrawal of the Kethrathi task force, Marcus began preparing his ship for departure. The Emperor and his guards were escorted back to their shuttle. But before leaving, Vashti Mordeth paused at the airlock. Admiral Chen, he said, I must ask. How many retired admirals does humanity have operating as cargo haulers? Marcus thought for a moment. Your Imperial Magnificence, the Terran Colonial Navy has been operating for over 2 centuries. We've fought dozens of wars, explored hundreds of systems, and trained thousands of officers. Many of them eventually retire and pursue civilian careers. He smiled. But we never really stopped being Navy. The Emperor nodded slowly, understanding dawning in his ancient eyes. How many? Enough, Marcus replied simply. More than enough. As the Kethrathi shuttle departed, Marcus settled into his pilot's chair and began plotting a course to Proxima Station. His cargo of rare minerals wasn't going to deliver itself, and he had a schedule to keep. But as he watched the Kethrathi fleet withdrawing in the distance, pursued by discreet human escorts who would ensure they maintained proper boundaries, Marcus allowed himself a small smile of satisfaction. Computer, he said. "Open a communication channel to Admiral Martinez." "Channel open, Admiral." "Sarah, thanks for the timely intervention. Drinks are on me next time you're at Proxima Station." Admiral Martinez's laughter came through the speakers. "I'll hold you to that, Marcus. Try to stay out of trouble until then." "No promises," Marcus replied. "Chen out." He closed the channel and began the familiar routine of checking his ship's systems for the journey ahead. The TCL Marcus Aurelius responded to his commands with smooth efficiency, her engines humming with contentment now that her proper captain was back where he belonged. Behind them, the Kethrathi Emperor sat in his shuttle, contemplating the complete reversal of everything he had thought he knew about the galaxy. His empire had stumbled across humanity by accident, mistaken a retired admiral for a helpless cargo hauler, and nearly triggered a war with a species that had been watching them for months without being detected. The implications would take years to fully understand. But one thing was already clear. The Kethrathi Empire's expansion had reached its limit. Beyond this point lay humanity, and humanity was not going to be conquered. As the shuttle approached the flagship Dominion's edge, the Emperor made a mental note to begin immediate preparation for diplomatic contact. The Kethrathi would need to learn an entirely new approach to interstellar relations, one based on negotiation rather than conquest. Meanwhile, Marcus Chen settled into his pilot's chair, sipped coffee from his favorite mug, and began the peaceful journey to Proxima Station, his cargo hold full of valuable minerals, and his ship's defensive systems once again hidden beneath the innocent exterior of a civilian transport. Just another day in the life of a retired admiral, doing his best to enjoy a quiet retirement in a galaxy that sometimes had other ideas.